saying of the day is there's no news unless it's sensational news. And that goes back to, in San Antonio, they used to say that if it bleeds, it leads. You know, the people that write the headlines in newspapers do not write the story. They read the story and then write a headline. You know, they're always looking for something where a man bites a dog or something unusual so it'll get people's attention and they might read the story. Mm-hmm. But it's not real news unless it's sensational, is what most of the news people say.
And in the political world, you've always said there's show horses and work horses, and it seems like the show horses that say the crazy things are the ones that get the clicks and the views.
Oh, they get the headlines. Mm-hmm. You know, Congressman Ralph Hall one time told me we were coming back from Camp David and we were in Marine One. We're about to land on the White House lawn. And the press was all out there, and I said, are you going to say anything? He said, as a freshman congressman, I'd have to say something really stupid for them to run with it. and he was right. You know, he didn't say anything. I didn't say anything either. Today we're going to talk about Fox News and how they got where they are to be the number one in cable news, and that their cable programs, 9 out of 10 cable programs of the top 10 are from Fox. And you have to go back to the 80s and 90s, and Rupert Murdoch, who had started Fox Network, felt like that the media and CNN were all slanted to the left, that they were certainly pro-democratic and certainly more liberal. And so he talked to a fellow by the name of Roger Ailes, and Roger Ailes worked for Nixon and did all of his TV ads and everything, and was a TV ad producer and was very good at it. One thing that Murdoch had done, he had created Sky News in Europe. There was a 24/7 around-the-clock news, and that had been successful. And so he talked at length with Roger Ailes, Murdoch did, and they came up with a trial of making it a populist station, and they said not a country club Republican station, but a populist that would appeal to the masses. And they came up with an idea that was really brilliant, that they would pay the cable people to take their program. And the result was that they started off with, all the cable companies said, well, hey, pay us. And they did that a few years. They stopped and then started charging them once they built it up. But they officially started the first program October 7th, 96, and they had a budget of that first year of $80 million. And in 2024, their gross revenue was $14 billion. So they'd gone from 80 million to 14 billion, and which was a sign of success. Your major companies did not want to advertise on Fox at first, and some still don't, but it's too controversial. But they've also backed away from CNN, and so they have different things that their ads appeal to the very people that like their news and like their opinion, but they had rapid expansion, and it became very successful. They were going after middle America. They people that were getting welfare benefits, they weren't going after them. The extremely rich don't watch that much TV. They weren't going after them, but they were going after the person that that time was making somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 and owned their own home and was certainly more conservative. There was a gap, they felt like, in reporting, and so they came up with a theme that said, we report, you decide. And now they've already reported what they've decided, and so they're hoping you'll agree with them. But in 96, they had 10 million households, and there was 100,000 prime time. And by 2019, they were averaging 2.5 million. And in 2020, they'd had 3.4 million, and they had 72% of the market in cable news. And so that they really pounded CNN and MSNBC. I asked one of the executives with AT&T one time why CNN was more slanted to the left, and he said, if you try to be fair, you'll lose your market. If you get into Fox, they've got the conservatives. CNN and MSNBC kind of split the liberals to some moderates, and that you have to stake out a group that agrees with you, or they won't stay tuned. And so I think that's what happens when these companies, they've got to figure out, how can we get a market share? And Fox got a market share. You know, that 3.4 million is a lot of people, and it was 72% of the market at that time. But that's of people watching TV. 3.4 million is about 1% of the population. So you don't dominate like you think. One of my friends that was running statewide talked about that he was in a Republican primary, so he advertised on Fox, and yet when he added the other four networks, his numbers went up dramatically. But that for the first month, he advertised on Fox News because he was running as a Republican, running a Republican primary, and that he had a targeted audience that he was after. And so they've been very successful in setting up a theme within their network, within their news network, that people want to hear, want to listen to, and they have followings. Bill O'Reilly had a huge following, and he made money. He wrote books and had some ghostwriter helping him write books for all kinds about Lincoln and Kennedy and pretty good books and well written. And then he had some personal issues that got him off the air, but he still does something, but not like he did. He doesn't have the following like he used to. Tucker Carlson was one of their big persons, and he got booted, and he still does some things, but it's not as much as it was. And then I'm trying to think of the guy, Glenn, that was with CNN. Glenn Beck. And he developed a following of more conservative people, and it wasn't what they wanted, and so they got rid of him. But it proves to me that a network, a cable network, whether it's Fox, CNN, or MSNBC, they have more of a following than the individual. The individual may have good ratings, like Bill O'Reilly and everything, but once they go off the air, people are not going to hunt for them to find them some other place. They started in '96, but by 2001, Fox had overtaken CNN. So in 5 years, they were able to do that.
And for those that don't know, that's impressive.
It is.
That is very impressive.
Anytime you take over first place, you do it in a short period of time, it's very impressive. And that's true in radio. You've been in radio forever, and it's true on TV. There's one station in Lubbock that has a big following on the news, and they've had the same two anchors, a man and a woman. They've had them for like 35, 40 years. And people just got used to watching. That's what they watch.
They're comfortable and they feel like they know them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Phil Gramm was running for Congress, and he was in a runoff with a weatherman out of Dallas. And he was out campaigning, Waxahachie, and a woman said, I'd like to vote for you, but we know so-and-so. And he said, how do you know him? She said, he gives the weather every night on our TV. Mm-hmm. And he thought, wow, I got to make sure I have enough TV on that people feel like they know me. trust. That's a factor, and that 37% of Americans trust Fox News. That's somewhat low, but there's a lot of undecideds. If you ask, do you trust CNN, Fox, whatever, there's just going to be a lot of people, well, I might trust some of their stories, but I don't trust that. They hate to make a commitment on that.
Don't you see that as a problem in America, what the news source you can trust? That's a big issue.
It is. There's some people who will watch a certain news on the internet, and they'll develop a trust for it. Mm-hmm. But they're always trying to get you to listen to theirs or to read their news, and that things move so fast now that they feel like if they don't get out there in front of it, that they've lost, credence, and they've lost followers. And so they don't check it out. In a newspaper, you always had the chance that you could, before it went to print, you had 2 hours or 4 or 6 hours to look it over. And there's a lawyer, a very good lawyer out of Tulsa. Gary Richardson ran for governor in Oklahoma one time, and he had sued numerous TV stations, radio stations, newspapers, and he's never won a case against a newspaper, and he's never lost a case against TV stations. And I think part of that, you have a lot of young kids that are doing a story for TV, and they're not spending time, and they don't have a copy editor that's going over everything to make sure everything's accurate. Mm-hmm. And but that to me was surprising. Never beat them. The newspaper never lost. His TV station, and he's been very successful in all.
How do you feel about politicians bringing lawsuits against news outlets?
We had a situation that happened one time for a public official here in Texas, and there was one of the newspapers, there were 2 newspapers at the time, but one of the papers in Houston said something about her, and had a letter and wrote them and said, we're looking at suing y'all for what you did. And they never mentioned her again, good, bad, or anything. And so, I mean, they'll, they're not unarmed, that there's certain things they can do, but you're pretty well fair game in a lot of things, unless you can show that it's just malicious and untrue. You're not going to be able to win in those usually, because you're a public official. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to the old New York Times versus Sullivan. You'd have to prove that it's that it was meant to harm you, and it was not correct.
Is that defamation?
Yeah, and statute of limitations on defamation, libel, slander is a year rather than 2 years. Most cases are 2 years or even 4 years, but it's a year. So you got a year to get over it. And if you sue them, you got to realize this: instead of dying, it's going to be relived, on a frequent basis. A couple of other things that mentioned in passing, that in South Korea, there was a guy called the police to report something over 1,600 times in 4 days. I mean, he's busy, but might break his index finger dialing all that often. He was doing over 470 times a day, and they finally arrested him for harassing. If you're going to call the police 470 times in one day, you need to have something good to tell them.
Yeah.
Also, they came out, there was a study, to start off the day, you need to smile in the shower. And I don't know, I'm busy showering and trying to get in and out real fast. And same thing that I was reading said that 96% of the people in America admit that they drive aggressively. And I've met all 96%, I think. Honking is up, studies show, and tailgating is down. I had I've had a couple of people worked with me. One was a guy named Ricky Knox, helped run my campaigns and was very good. He always felt like if he could see the license plate on the car in front of him, that he wasn't close enough. He gets so close that you could not see the back. And Logan Spence, Logan is a very good lobbyist and lawyer and is one of my partners. Logan was chief of staff for Dan Patrick for over 10 years. But Logan and Ricky Knox, in my opinion, had the same driver's ed instructor, because both of them, they tailgate so close that you can't even see the license plate on the car in front of you. And I got where if I'm driving with them, I just look down at the floor and get on the phone or something. And Ricky, the tailgater, is a nickname it never did stick. Nicknames sometimes in town they'll stick and sometimes they don't. I always think back to growing up in Dimmitt. My friend Red Dog Morris, his dad was known as Pee Wee Morris, and he was real good friends with the mayor in Dimmitt, who was named Shorty Manning, and for obvious reasons. And one time we were at a football game, and Red Dog and I were seated behind his dad, Pee Wee, and Shorty Manning was coming up the steps to go get a seat, and he said, "Hello, Pee Wee," and he said, "Hello, Shorty." And the guy behind us said, "Do those fellas have a grudge against each other or something?" No, that's just their names. It wouldn't. When Fastball Walker, Bill Walker, died, we had to put in the Lubbock paper that Fastball Walker died. If we just put Bill Walker, they wouldn't know. But we put his picture in there and said Fastball Walker had passed away, and people, they knew who that was.
They knew Fastball.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much money is spent on surveys. Every week we go through different studies and surveys that are out there. And
Gallup and people that do polls, they get hired all kinds of things. In political polls, you'll have people will do a joint poll together if they're friends, and they'll be running, and they'll want to find out how they're doing, and they'll share it. But a good poll is going to cost you about $25,000, $30,000. Now, some of these that I think are kind of off the wall, they're not all that scientific. But a good scientific poll will have a margin of error of about 3 or 4%. It will cost you somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000, but they're accurate. The key on polls is to make sure that you do them the same way every time, because what you're trying to do in a political poll is to see what trends are taking place. And I had a guy that worked for me in my first campaign named Don Boucher. He was a professor at Texas Tech and had been head of the Peace Corps in Uruguay. And he ran a poll and read a book about polling, and we talked to a couple of pollsters. So he ran it the same way every time so we could see if there's a trend moving. And the first time he ran a poll, I had name ID of about 5 to 8%. And then the next time after we'd started some ads, well, I was up in the 20s. And then the third poll, last poll we ran, I was running the 60s and 70s because we'd been running a lot of ads. And that poll showed that there was a 8-point spread. I was ahead of the guy 8 points 3 days before the election. And on election night, I beat him 54-46, 8 points.
Wow.
And that was not one where we paid $30,000. We had some volunteers, and we had, they would call. How we got the numbers, we took a phone book, back when there were really phone books and people had home phones, didn't have cell phones. And we'd look and we'd take the first name in the left-hand column and call that number, and then if they didn't answer, we'd go the second, third, fourth, until we got an answer, and then we'd go the next column. And we did that the same every time to see if there was any trend. And the key is, you can see there's trend, and we felt like that we were going to win by a substantial margin by election night, and did. But polling, if you can poll 635 people and be within 2 or 3 points, It's real accurate, and people don't believe that, and they said that couldn't be true. Well, it is true, and it's something that the pollsters in a presidential campaign, they're polling every night, and they're polling in the U.S. Senate and the governor's race maybe. But if you're a state representative, if you're running for state representative, you've never held office, you don't need to run a poll. I can tell you, nobody knows you. You know, now once you get some ads out there, you can run a poll. But I've always said that if you're out campaigning, you'll get a poll of your own. You know, people will tell you what they're thinking and what's important to them. And but it is a science, and they poll all kinds of, you know, like mosquito bites being touched up with toothpaste. Now, I don't even know how you ask that question, but there's certainly numerous polls are taken off, and some of them are taken. Somebody's standing outside the grocery store in the parking lot asking you a question, and those are not as accurate as telephone polls. But telephone polls, in the last 10 years, there's so many cell phones, and people don't have landlines anymore. And the result is you don't get accurate accounting. In 2016, the polls showed that Hillary Clinton was going to win. And that I doubted that, because on election day, they reported that there was something like 100,000 people that went to see Trump in Detroit at midnight. You know, it's hard to get out 100,000 people if you're going to give them free food. So that told me that something was going on out there. I think you go back to the Iranian Revolution in 1979, when a rally, 1 million people showed up for a rally. You know, if 1 million people, it's hard to get 1 million people to go to anything. You know, even if you pay them. And that tells me there's something to it. You have to be careful in that some of the people giving the estimates will not give good estimates, and that if they're favorable to the group that's protesting, they may say, well, there was 100,000 people there. How do you know? You know, and you can take a space and look and see that space and start figuring out, you know, how many people there. If somebody's in Washington, D.C., the people that estimate the crowds up there are usually pretty accurate.
You know, speaking of polling, if you want to take a deep dive into polling, it's a great interview episode with Mike Basleese. He was fantastic, very interesting. Go back through our catalog and listen to that.
Yeah, I had someone this week ask me, how do we sign up for the catalog? And touch on that.
Just go back through, just go to find the podcast, Kent Hance, the best storyteller in Texas, and all you do is scroll down. You can just,
and it has a list.
Every episode is listed. You'll see the title and the date, and if it's a title or in description, and if it interests you, you can listen to it. It's literally just going to wherever you get your podcast and scrolling down, and you'll find it. In fact, this week on Thursday, I'll put that one with Vasleese back out for everyone to listen to.
That on Thursday, we do a repeat of over the last 3 years, and we've gotten a lot of people like that.
And on Friday now, we're putting out a greatest hits. It's about 7-8 minutes long of some of your best stories from over the years, all put together into one episode.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, so go back and listen to those past ones. There's some really good stuff.
We've had some short clips where there'd be a minute or 2 minutes. We do those on Thursday or Tuesday.
Well, I've decided to make those a little bit longer, about 7 or 8 minutes.
Okay, so that's the reason
But they may be a minute long. One story will be about a minute long. The next one might be a minute and a half. The next one might be 30 seconds. But it all adds up to about 7 or 8 minutes. Okay. But nothing but the greatest hits of Chancellor Kent Hance. We try to keep it around 20 minutes. So if you're in drive time. Now Joe Rogan, you know, some of those people will go an hour. Oh, they'll go 3-4 hours. Some of them,
on and on. And I figure somebody, you know, they might turn it off or might die during that period of time.
That's a long time to sit and talk with somebody, but I think it's good because, you know, we're talking about the news, talking about Fox earlier. If you were going on Fox News tonight, how long would you have to make your point? You know, 6 minutes, 4 minutes?
You wouldn't have. I'd say 3. The average is about probably anywhere from 2 to 5, but 3 would be about the average. That's the reason anyone in politics, you need to decide what you're going to say. We used to do that in campaigns. What's the theme of the day? No matter what question, what theme are we're going to try to get it back to so that we'll stay on target. And Trump probably jumps around more than anyone. He'll be up on a theme of the day or something, but he'll have some sidebar comments, and usually pretty funny or pretty unusual, and that's just him. And somebody said they were going to try to change that, and I said, number one, you can't. Number two, don't change, because people, if they sense there's a big change, they wonder why. What are they trying to do? And
do you believe that the president, because President Trump has truly changed the way that America sees the president, because he does so much media. Every day he's doing a press conference. Do you think going forward in the next 20 years, the presidents of the future will do the same thing?
Well, I think where he changed it all was social media, Twitter, and X now as it's called, that he's got someone with him, and that he'll just tell him, put this on X, or he'll come up with something, and away they go. And so he's always posted. He's bypassed he has more press conferences than anyone's ever had, but at the same, he bypassed the national media. He's going to put on Twitter or social media. What's the one now?
Truth Social?
Yeah, Truth Social. He'll put it on there and just bypass the national media and bypass their asking questions or anything.
It's amazing, though, because you see him when he's walking to Marine One to get on the helicopter to go to the Ryder Cup last weekend. He takes questions every time. Yeah. I just don't remember past presidents doing that.
They didn't. He hates some people in the press, but he likes the press because they give him a chance to tell his side of the story. And and I always laugh. He had a reporter not long ago. He said something. You're a bad person. You're a bad reporter. Just every politician's wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And you're a bad person. You're a bad reporter. It's a wonder you can keep a job.
Yeah.
Just ignored him and went on. It's pretty funny. Remember, saying of the day, if it's not sensational, it's not news.